You're listening to Comic Reflections. This is our episode 2 of our DVD commentary series. I'm Nicholas Prom.
And I'm Jordan Andrews.
And we've got little baby Archie Andrews with us this morning. Hopefully he will continue to be a good boy and stay quiet while we record the DVD commentary for Secret Origin, the story of DC Comics. I don't know how well this is going to work as a documentary with a commentary, but we'll give it a shot. We're going to give it a try. So, yes, shall we?
Let us begin.
Let it begin. It's been a while since I've watched this, but I think this is a really great documentary. Oh yeah, you should have hit play a moment ago. When Jordan said begin, that's when he pressed play. So, if you need to rewind, you can do that. Because I'm not going to redo the intro today. Just having one of those mornings. So, here we get this wonderful imagery stuff comes up.
Right.
Yay. And Neil Adams is about to start talking in about 2 seconds.
We just met Neil Adams last week, was it?
Last Wednesday.
Last Wednesday.
Awesome.
Oh, man.
Neil was God.
It was so great.
Here we go. I love this. It's a great piece of Alex Ross art right here.
Yeah, this documentary seems kind of geared toward those that aren't well-versed in the comic universe to kind of get an in to see what DC was like.
Yeah, well, and it is, but also, I mean, it's a beautiful celebration of the medium. I think it's great. I mean, here we go, Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, they have so many great artists. Well, I think mostly writers, but they have Jim Lee in here too.
Yeah.
So I think they've got some great. Bless you, Archie.
Yeah, there's Archie sneezing.
We got some great writers and artists in here.
Yeah. I think it's really great. Oh, there's Jim Lee.
There's Jim Lee.
Yeah. And he's supposed to be a real nice guy. I'm not a big fan of his art.
Yeah. Well, see, I like his art. I'm not a fan of the Wildstorm 90s.
Well, anyone who appreciates good comics isn't.
All right. But his art's fine.
Sure. And there's Mark Waid, great comic writer. Mark Waid, you're still wrong about Man of Steel. It was great.
You didn't like Man of Steel?
Oh, God. Oh, you missed that. Oh, that's a diatribe that we don't need to get into.
Okay.
And, of course, we got Ryan Reynolds narrating this piece, which is it's just cool.
Yeah, he's got a great voice. Green Lantern
it's good.
was...
And this came out around, I think that was about to come out or had just come out or something like that.
Yeah.
This is a few years old. Hey, Captain Marvel. And Plastic Man. Now, both of those characters, of course, acquired by DC later. They were not original characters.
Captain Marvel started at Fawcett.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, and then Plastic Man was from Quality Comics. And they put out also... actually, that's where Blackhawk came from as well. And Uncle Sam and the rest of the Freedom Fighters were all Quality characters. I love this.
Oh gosh.
Neil Adams.
Every time Neil Adams opens his mouth, it's just, gosh, you better listen.
Oh yeah, well, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah.
He's
his,
the greatest.
And his mannerisms. He's such a man of the people.
Oh yeah, I mean, and he's done so much to advance. Not only he's a great artist, but he's done so much to advance creators' rights. You know, in the '70s, he really went to bat for Siegel and Schuster, who had basically been screwed out of their livelihood, or really things owed to them for creating Superman.
Oh yeah.
And here we got Paul Levitz, who was great. Started real young at DC, and did many of the great Legion of Superheroes stories. Oh, Archie.
You had something to say about that.
Now, Gerard Jones wrote a great book about the history of the birth of the medium, and it is called Men of Tomorrow: Geeks, Gangsters, and the Birth of the Comic Book. And it is an excellent book. I should lend it to you.
Great.
And I recommend it to anyone listening to this to go check out that book. It's terrific.
Yeah. Those two guys, the
Donenfeld and Leibowitz.
Yeah, they just
I think that's right.
They so epitomized the 1930s with their...
Oh yeah. And that book really delves into those two guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gerard Jones has written some comics too. I'm blanking on what he's done, but
Okay, I saw him on here, and I didn't recognize his name from any comics that I've read. So knowing that he, wrote that book makes sense why he's
yeah, he's definitely a historian, an excellent one. There was a few pieces of speculative stuff that were included in the book that certain facts came to light, and I was like, well, that's not correct. But by and large, it's an excellent book.
Okay.
Oh yes, this is the guy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And this is a very small overview of the beginnings, and that book has a huge chunk of its material devoted to this, and it's really cool.
Now, I didn't know until I watched this movie
Yeah.
what DC stood for.
Detective Comics.
Detective Comics.
And a lot of people don't realize
Right.
it.
And
So if you call it DC Comics, it's kind of like saying ATM machine.
Right, it's a little
You know,
redundant.
yeah.
But,
But everybody does it. So.
Right. We'll let it go.
Yeah.
Same with ATMs. I don't get too finicky with people.
Yeah. There are things that I have that I just get my hackles up about. I try not to let those be one of them. Are you laughing there, Archie? That's funny, huh?
You might be getting tired.
Oh man. Don't sabotage us, Archie. So, but I love this, like humble beginnings, sons of immigrants. This is, comic books are an immigrant, wholly American concept.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah, they have them elsewhere, but they started here. This is such an American thing.
Right. And that's part of what this documentary is trying to explain.
Oh, yeah. And comic books, I mean, I think they capture so much, not only the immigrant dream and immigrant culture, but they embody the American myth and ideal so wonderfully.
Right.
They are our modern mythology.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's what I was thinking. Is the Greeks had the mythology, and then there was Norse mythology. And,
Sure, yeah. I mean, every culture has their myth structure, and this is our modern myth.
Right.
Yeah, the original Superman was really based on kind of an amalgamation of like certain pulp heroes,
Right.
and wasn't necessarily a hero. Like in their earliest iteration of him. By the time he made it to the comics, of course, the concept was more fully developed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love the story of how it took, because Superman was such a new idea of someone having superpowers. I mean, the Shadow could cloud men's mind, but he couldn't bend steel. The people rejected this idea, and then of course it became the runaway hit of the 30s, or in the 40s. Yeah. And it's so funny because in the first few years of Superman stories, he's really just kind of goes barreling into lots of his adventures, and he's almost a bit sadistic and toys with people, because he can, do all this stuff. It's a far cry from, what we tend to think of Superman as the very squeaky clean idealist, who doesn't want to hurt anybody, really. Oh God, we got the late great Joe Kubert here. God bless him. Of course, you've Kubert from Sergeant Rock and Hawkman and plenty of other things, but one of the greats of comics. Yeah, I'm gonna see Mark Waid's just reiterating what I was saying earlier. Um, love this. I really like the style of this documentary. They're kind of like getting these great close-ups of old panels
Right.
and kind of making some limited animation, making it move, making it kind of pop out. Um, I think it really demonstrates the dynamism, the cinematic aspect of how comic books are presented. So I think that's really cool. Yeah, and poor Joe Shuster spent the bulk of his life in basically poverty because his eyesight was failing him. Um, oh, here we go, Louise Simonson. She's great. Of course, she's the wife of Walt Simonson, great comic writer or artist himself. I just love her. I think she's fun.
Later it talks about the death of Superman, which is
Oh, and she tears up.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, she's just her personality on the camera is just great.
Oh yeah, and well, I think it speaks volumes about the character. If you can be that emotionally involved in a fictional character, that says something to its value as a culture and what the Superman, for that example, embodies.
Yeah, absolutely.
So. I love in the original, Superman the movie, '78, when Lois says, oh, Superman cares about everyone, Jimmy, and that's so perfect. Superman, the Christ figure, is really important because even if you're not a spiritual person, you can, think of Superman as that ideal, knowing he's an unreal figure, but what what a figure to try to emulate, at least in a moral aspect. I think that's very good. So, and that's very American because we're such a melting pot of different cultures.
And that includes, religions. With
Well,
all
right,
different...
but this can be something transcendent that can be
Exactly.
shared
Yeah.
among all our different cultures. Because America doesn't have a culture.
Right.
A lot of people will say that. A lot of other countries, but
there are still common themes that we can all share.
sure.
Like these great stories.
Oh yeah, and I love this whole bit about Supermania because it's something that I was unaware of before I saw this documentary. I was like, okay, yeah, Superman's great, but I didn't know what a phenomenon he was at that time.
Hey Mom, have another helping of that swell cereal. That's
Swell.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's really a shame because merchandising and all of these things, radio and cartoon and film adaptations were blowing up, and Siegel and Schuster didn't see a dime from all of those.
Oh, see, this documentary doesn't even touch on that.
Oh yeah, I mean they sold Superman for like $100, something like that, $60 or something. And Superman, and I think Zatara at the same time. But it work for hire, and DC provided the funds and the means for it to be distributed and become a popular thing. But yeah, there's a lot to the story with the Schusters and the relationship with DC. Their careers again essentially evaporated because of the law. They sued to get more money or sued to have ownership or whatever. And they ended up basically being all but blackballed in the industry for a number of years because who wants to hire a guy that's you're gonna have come and create and work for you and then turn around and sue you? Right. I think that was the attitude in the industry. And Jerry Siegel actually had a big ego. He would go into other comic houses like Lev Gleason or something and say, "I'm Jerry Siegel, the creator of Superman." And I think Lev Gleason himself, or somebody else of that caliber, would say, "I know damn right who you are, and you'll never work for me. Get out of here."
Just because he had a reputation.
Yeah, and he did not deserve the misfortune that was handed to him.
Right.
But he certainly got taken down to size.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so here's another sad story. Bob Kane is not the sole creator of Batman.
Right.
the important elements that made Batman Batman were created by Bill Finger and not given, and Bob Kane just kind of took all the credit.
I think they mentioned Bill Finger in here though.
Oh yeah.
Sometime and you see it on the when you read the comics, created by Bob Kane and Bill Finger usually.
Yeah. Again, another guy who died penniless. While Bob Kane, he got a much better deal than this Siegel and Schuster, and he got his byline on all the books and says created by Bob Kane, even though guys like Jerry Robinson and other guys were doing the book. And he continued to profit and live a very comfortable lifestyle, as we're seeing here. So.
He made himself up in the same way that Bruce Wayne makes up this Batman. He was born about 5, went to the Bob Kane name very early. Everyone who knew him in the old days said he got a nose job because he had money. Very dapper, very concerned with his appearance. He really wanted to be.
He and Stan Lee were great friends. And as much of a lovable character that Stan Lee is, there's another person who, hey, maybe he got the idea from Bob Kane. Who was a big success before him, before Stan Lee hit his big stride. But, Stan Lee kind of pretty much took all the credit for creating many of the DC characters. Now he's kind of back, and I was like, well, co-created. But
Stan Lee, you said
Marvel Comics.
Oh yeah, so he helped create DC characters.
No. Over at Marvel.
Right. I just think you said DC characters.
Oh, here we go. Oh, I love Erwin Hasten. He worked on the Golden Age Green Lantern, among other things. Love him.
Calling himself Schmucks.
Oh my gosh, and he's like 1,000 years old in this. I'm not sure if he's still living, but what a lovable old man. But anyway, back to Stan Lee. He largely took a lot more credit for writing and creating those things than he did. I think a lot of the stories, for instance, were really more written by Jack Kirby. Maybe Lee had plotted them. Kirby does all the art and, creates the story. And Lee goes back and maybe punches up his dialogue a bit, because maybe some of Kirby's dialogue was clunky. But, there's a reason that Steve Ditko kind of left and had the relationship with Marvel soured because of Stan Lee and not feeling he could be creative to the level he wanted to. Ditko wanted the Green Goblin to be a complete stranger to Peter Parker, but of course Stan insisted that it be Norman Osborn's for dramatic effect. It just, what's the point if it's just some guy?
Right.
But
which makes sense.
Well, right, but I can see Ditko's point of view on that, and so lots of relationships sour. There's Dan Didio, very controversial figure these days. He's like the Jim Shooter of DC. Some people really like Jim Shooter. He was again, he started at 14 writing Supergirl and Legion of Superhero stories at DC, but in the late 70s he became the editor-in-chief an editor and then editor-in-chief at Marvel for like a decade. The Shooter era at Marvel is he's controversial. People either love Jim Shooter or hate Jim Shooter.
Yeah.
People felt strained creatively. But he had a particular vision of how he wanted Marvel Comics to go. And that's a whole other ball of wax, but to get into. William Moulton Marston, here's another character.
Pop psychology guy.
Well, and he had the polyamorous relationship. He had his wife and his girlfriend, and they lived together and raised, that side-by-side families. It's interesting.
And he does this blonde-brunette experiment, which is total pop psychology, mumbo-jumbo to entertain people back in the 40s and 50s.
He's definitely kind of a huckster, but Marston? Oh, well, she's going to... Louise is going to tell about this.
Graduate students staying with them.
Marston, you got to admire him a little bit. It's like, oh, way to go, you dirty old man. But he made it work. That's difficult to make that go.
And he pawned, he created Wonder Woman, and then kind of imbued Wonder Woman with his sexual fantasies. And
all of this, like I think it says in here, it's like, oh, it's a bondage a lot. Oh, maybe somebody gets tied up every story. And he says, no, more like every page, I think, in this documentary. No, let me tell you, it's true. I've read
Really
Gold-
racy, and pawns it off as feminism, and
Right.
he was a manipulative, smart.
Yeah, but
dude.
no, if you read Golden Age Wonder Woman stories, no, somebody really is tied up on every page, just about.
Now, did he draw them as well, or just wrote the stories?
No, and he handpicked the artist.
Gotcha.
And this artist, I forget their name, but it's a weird choice. I'm not crazy about the Golden Age Wonder Woman artist. It's because it's kind of weird.
Sure. Her
The
New
art.
52 stuff is, from what I've read, is great.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It's a total revamp,
Reboot,
but
right.
those are good stuff. And also the post-crisis George Perez, I think Mark Wolfman wrote the book too, run on Wonder Woman that's excellent.
Yeah.
John Byrne did a good run on Wonder Woman in the 90s that a lot of people don't talk about. There were good periods for her character. Unfortunately, she just doesn't have a strong rogues gallery that kind of make her weak from a reader's standpoint. I mean, sure, you got the Cheetah, Giganta, Circe, Dr. Psycho, and maybe one or two others, but people don't really know these characters. And the Angleman, but they're not that great of villains.
This is talking about power through submission, which is always
Which is so backwards.
Right.
I'm like, what? Yeah, here we go.
Yeah, he's talking about the bondage.
This is perfect. Yeah, and it's totally true. You got women on leashes, and women in chains and tied up, and wow, okay.
It's one of those things where you're looking at this and it's touted as feminist literature, so you want to be progressive. And say,
but it's double.
yeah, it's great.
It's talking out of both sides of your mouth. It's total doublespeak.
Absolutely.
Because it is saying, power to women, but it's really like women should be submissive and,
And then, Ryan Reynolds just said, Wonder Woman was picked up mostly by boys and
Yeah.
servicemen.
But it's funny though, when the women's lib movement came and Gloria Steinem, used her as the figurehead of that movement. It's kind of forgetting a lot of that. And also in the 50s when she was cleaned up and more concerned about, having a boyfriend, what's Steve Trevor gonna like? The Justice Society, she was their secretary for crying out loud. So yeah. Let's see what's going on here. Sorry, I lost my spot.
This is where they have all these guys in the room just punching out comics.
Oh
left
yeah,
right.
and this is the golden age for you. It was a factory kind of element in it. Just anybody that could draw. I mean, Joe Kubert again. He started drawing comics at 12 in I think the Iger Eisner shop, and Erwin Hasen too. Young guys, and you just wouldn't see that today anymore. I mean. But it's definitely a different time. It's a kind of a magical thing that kind of coalesced at the right time, and wonderful cultural phenomenon with it.
Yes, and it was able to grow, especially given the political climate of America and the arrival of immigrants who.
Well, and especially the emergence of or the coming World War, Second World War, and entrance into World War. Comic books. Oh, I love Mr. Terrific and all these guys. But I lost my train of thought.
I love this, and Erwin Hasen is talking about how he didn't know what ring the
what finger it's or what hand. Oh, God bless Captain America. Or Captain America. Captain Marvel. Love Captain Marvel so much.
And this is his first appearance. That's in Fawcett Comics, correct?
Correct, yeah. And I tell you, my friend had the Treasury Edition reprint of that. And I got my first really introduction to Captain Marvel was reading that first Captain Marvel story. Yeah. And it was magic for me. The word was Shazam.
And now they changed his name to Shazam.
Which is awful. I'll always call him Captain Marvel.
Right.
That's one other thing, though. The Golden Age has a weak point because it's lots of superheroes and not a lot of supervillains. There are some, but mainly the villains are Nazis and spies and saboteurs and fifth columnists and that kind of stuff.
They talk about the KKK later.
Sure. And also, it's kind of like when the war ended, superhero comics kind of fell into decline.
Absolutely.
Because the main enemy was the Nazis. And yeah, I'm getting a little
Once the
ahead.
Nazis are, oh, no.
But it was interesting, though, because you saw a shift. A handful of superhero comics kind of survived.
Small handful, yeah.
Yeah, without interrupted publication. But mainly the shift went to horror comics, crime comics, and if I can't remember if it delves into this in this.
It delves
story.
into horror comics a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is Superman on the radio.
Have you ever listened to the Superman radio show?
I haven't.
I
I've
think
seen
it's-
the old cartoons.
Oh, those are wonderful.
Oh, and this is where it talks about the KKK, how they,
Oh, I love it. Love it.
how they find the code word and
And the great Danny O'Neill. I'm so mad. Last year he was at Emerald City Comic Con, and I didn't know that he was going to be there until like a few days
Too late.
after. I was like, oh, I think he and Jerry Conway and a couple other of my like favorite old comic writers were there, and I was just, I want to kill myself. Not really, but you know, I was disappointed.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they had an inside guy that gave them the code word, and they would just reveal it on the radio, and
That's awesome. When you have to remember, like, especially in the golden age of comics, like, probably like 99% of the, or close to it, of the people working in comics are Jewish guys.
absolutely.
And the
So,
KKK were big. They were like not just people of color, but anti-Jew and anti-Catholic.
absolutely. Anybody that wasn't a Caucasian Protestant,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
they had real struggles. I mean,
Oh,
they
man.
hated them.
Yeah. I love the Fleischer Superman cartoons.
Absolutely, I've
They-
seen these. I had a collection of them. I don't know where they are at this
Yeah.
point. They probably
Well,
got lost.
They're in the public domain, and so there are many people have just kind of cleaned them up
Shut
and
them
put them
out.
out. Yeah, you can get the complete collection. I had a nice VHS tape that had them all,
Oh, that's great.
and it was a bootleg. But I think I gave it to my friend so he could show his kids and stuff. But God, these are great, and it's so wonderful. I remember watching this. You know, the heat vision and X-ray vision in the comics early on are the same. They don't become like a separate power until later.
So when
It's
you're
just-
looking through something, you also destroy it with heat vision at the same time? or-
No, he can see through stuff, unless it's lead, of course. But by intensifying that, it becomes the heat, the heating element. But later, we got into this, it changed during the Silver Age. Gosh, these cartoons are great.
Yeah, and the story on here was that they gave them this ridiculous number, financial number, in order to draw it. They had to pay them
Right.
tons, but they did it anyway. And
Yeah, the Fleischer Studios, they didn't want to make them.
Right.
And then they gave them a crazy amount of money. They're like, all right, we do them. And I think Mark Waid said, you see every penny.
Absolutely.
And they are wonderful cartoons
they look
today.
Great, yeah. They hold up even now.
Because there are many cartoons that are, old stuff that are like, wow, this is not good. And they don't hold up and they're not good cartoons. Like Super Friends from the 70s. And like, this kind of stinks. There's Captain Marvel Jr. and Uncle Sam.
And that was
Yeah.
in the golden age, and some in the silver age. There was so
I
much
loved it.
happening in America, and that America was involved in overseas.
Sure.
That there was tons of stories to tell
Yeah.
about that. And then in the modern age, or after World War II, especially, like we were saying, there was a decline after that because there wasn't
Yeah.
those stories.
I
that they were
remember
used to.
reading a great Justice Society story from the Golden Age, it's a reprint, where they're combating juvenile delinquency, like young adolescent gangs, and this really was a problem at that time, either during the war years or just in the post-war years, and in the late 40s and the early 50s is when the Beat generation kind of came, and you got a lot of people riding the rails, hopping trains. You had the Depression on, and even though the war kind of got us out of that. I love this.
Yeah, they're talking about how would Superman end the war, because they couldn't involve him in the comics, because
Right.
then the war would be over in a day. And
Exactly. Although there's a great series that I think Roy Thomas started in either the late 70s or the early 80s, the All-Star Squadron. And it was Roosevelt enlists the Justice Society and the other Golden Age superheroes to fight the Nazis. And it's pretty sweet. Sometimes it's home front stuff, or a lot of it is, and other times it's going on missions. But, yeah. And Roy Thomas, Sheldon Moldoff, yeah.
They're talking about servicemen that were also involved in the comics
Oh,
industry.
yeah.
And
People remember Jack Kirby. I guess I'm getting into Marvel, or Timely at the time. Wait, hang on a sec. This guy created the Sandman, and people forgot this guy a lot, but
he was killed in action.
Or co-created the original Sandman, yeah. And I love that character, and I recently reread that
original
the
Sandman.
gas masked Sandman. It's funny, when Kirby got out of the service, he came back and he changed the costume and did some Sandman stories, and they're great. But I remember going back and reading that very first Sandman story, and it's still awesome. Still cool. Love that Sandman. But what was I talking about? I always lose my train of thought. I get on these wonderful tangents and I blah. Yeah, and this is the problem. It's just like, how about just more supervillains? And it took a while before they got into really doing that. Deep in the Silver Age is when we start seeing the explosion of lots more villains.
And that's when they finally realized that that's how to do it. But fresh out of the war, I can imagine it would be difficult to say, well, what the hell?
Well, right.
Now?
I mean, really, when you just had, like I said, right after the war, most of those heroes disappeared, with the exception of, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and I think Captain Marvel and Plastic Man at other companies kind of went for a little while too. But it wasn't until 56 when they brought the Flash back. That's the start of the Silver Age right there. And then the Atom and the Green Lantern soon followed, and then it opened the floodgates. And then 61, we got Marvel with the Fantastic Four and all their wonderful characters as well.
And they talk about that a little bit in here.
Yeah. And it's... People tend to think of comics, superheroes. But there were as many thriving genres within comics in the Gold and Silver Age, crime, horror, westerns, romance. I love romance comics, by the way. They're wonderful.
And especially after the war, when you have the other, regular Joe stories to tell that don't involve superheroes, those will probably be the most.
Superman. Gotta love George Reeves. All that. It's fun. I want to binge watch this show sometime.
The Superman show?
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Oh, Marv Wolfman. He is just another one of my absolute favorite comic writers. Wrote Tomb of Dracula, wrote the Noon Teen Titans, wrote Crisis on Infinite Earths, and loads of other stuff, of course. But great. I love when he bends the guns. That's fun.
And how they do that back in,
You just make something soft and you mold it.
But it's great how realistic it looks even back then. I mean, the punches and are silly and ridiculous looking, but when he breaks through a wall, it looks so cool.
Oh yeah, and I think in all those episodes they had Superman break through a wall at least once an episode.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's what you can do, that's what you should do.
Well, yeah. What I think is we're gonna get into the delinquency in the horror
Hoover
comics.
And Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is when they get into the horror comics.
Oh, yeah. Crime and horror comics, they're a wonderful area within that golden age. I mean, great comics, really. Yes. People, I mean, he's definitely the greatest comic book villain ever, is Frederick Wertham. But at the same time, the enacting of the Comics Code Authority that kind of killed the horror comics and the crime comics, it allowed for the resurgence of superhero comics. And the constraints that had to be worked within for comic books allowed for this wonderful a surge of creativity, because when you're okay, we can't do this and this and this. Well, what else can we come
You
up
have
with?
to get creative with what you're given.
And there's some pretty wonderfully. I mean, I think of the Silver Age as a. Yeah, look at this, Neil. But it's a wonderful creative period in comics that I don't think we've ever seen since. Neil is correct also. So it's a double-edged sword. It happened. I'm against censorship. But at least we have those comics that we can go back and read in archive editions and things. And they really, this company put out, many companies went out of business, including EC Comics. And here's their publisher, William M. Gaines.
And they talk about how he wasn't the best person to give the speeches and to be there at the
by going, it's funny, the things might have blown over if he hadn't testified, and he actually was sick when he did the SS files too, so it was pretty bad, unfortunately.
Oh, Mad Magazine, Super Duper Man.
Oh yeah, and I love in that story. It was great that he had Super Duper Man meet Captain Marbles, and it parodied kind of the lawsuit between Fawcett and DC over Captain Marvel, quote-unquote, plagiarizing or infringing on their copyright. It's funny, they only did it really because Captain Marvel outsold Superman by a great deal. But, yeah, Super Duper Man versus Captain Marbles. It was a really fun bit of that story. It was really fun. Oh, I love this. This cover from the Vault of Horror, I think. There's Al Feldstein on the right. And God bless him, Al Feldstein is still living and doing commission work, which is cool. He's an old man, but yeah.
I loved that that speech, or the closing argument that he gave at the hearing. If this is what the public wants, this is what the public is going to get.
Yeah.
And that's one thing that I've noticed throughout the years is that people really like to blame media, like comics or movies, for their children's behavior.
Right, because it's easy to do that.
It is. It's hard to take responsibility for, and I'm not saying that comics are perfect or that there aren't bad things in them, but there's a modicum of responsibility.
What they're talking about here is, yes, in the beginning with the code, you saw a lot of really kind of lame, tame comics until
Pat Boone and
until you saw guys like Mort Weisinger and Julie Schwartz, as these were editors at DC Comics, getting kind of creative and like, what can we do within these constraints?
And then Julie Schwartz responsible for bringing back the Flash, correct?
Yes, and the Atom and the Green Lantern. And,
ushering in the Silver Age.
I mean, Julie Schwartz is one of my favorite figures in comics. He's wonderful. He's missed. He's one of the most beloved figures, especially at DC. People talk about Stan Lee, but Julie is probably as important, or more, I would feel. I mean, Stan, whether he created things or not, has done so much for comics, being their spokesman. I mean, he's the face of comic books. But Julie was important, really important. This is really true. It's very insightful that Louise Simmons is talking about. Grant Morrison.
Gosh, his accent.
Oh, he's great. I've never met a Scotsman I didn't like. Seriously.
I believe it. I haven't met many, but the ones that I have met, I do appreciate.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. The Legion. There it is. Adventure Comics. I can't remember the number, but that's the first appearance of the Legion.
Pat Boone and Superman come to compete for Lois Lane. They really did dumb her character down.
Oh yeah, because hey, there's young Neil. Look at that.
I loved the 70s or the 60s, or I think it's the 60s pictures of Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil that they show in here.
Oh yeah, with Denny had all his hair, like long hair.
So great because and they show him interviewing with,
Ah,
and he's so expressive.
the Silver Age, and this is my absolute favorite period in comics.
Oh, it's great.
Oh,
I love how Neil Adams talks about the old Flash and
yeah. And there's Julie, and I think that's Mort Weisinger next to him, on the left.
yeah,
Ah,
there
Julie.
he is.
Oh, God
Who's
bless.
gonna edit the Flash?
Julie Schwartz has been DC since 1942. I firmly believe there was
Oh, and Len
Len
Wein,
Wein.
creator of Swamp Thing and Wolverine, and one of my favorite comic writers, Len Wein. Awesome.
And I love his story about Julie Schwartz.
Oh yeah. He's got a funny story about Alan Moore later too.
Oh, really?
But
Oh, yeah, I remember. This is,
yeah.
I love how, I mean, obviously Alan Moore is not going to do an interview for this documentary,
I don't, he's,
but
not, he's not gonna do any more interviews
I
anymore,
love how
according
they,
to him.
how they splice him into this
Yeah.
from, found footage and
Well,
archive.
they have some stock footage.
Yeah.
There's a really cool documentary about Alan Moore. I think it's called The Mindscapes of Alan Moore. That's worth checking out. It's cool.
He's just such a
He's a weird-
interesting, crazy,
Yeah.
brilliant guy.
Yeah. I'll give him that. Oh man, I love Julie Schwartz.
Oh, gosh.
I now forgive Len Wein for creating Wolverine because he gave us Swamp Thing and so many other great stories.
and I feel like everything else I did was original practice.
Neil's kind of right about this.
Oh, about the old Flash. with
I
the
love Jay
helmet and
Garrick. Here's the thing:
wings.
the Golden Age characters are wonderful, but their Golden Age material not so much. Their revival in the Silver and Bronze Age of bringing those characters back once they started doing the multiverse stories, Earth 1, Earth 2, and so on. That's when those characters really get to have some depth and gravitas and really awesome. Like, of course, the Flash of Two Worlds, which I
Yes.
think it's talked about here.
Iconic issue.
Oh, I love that story.
We're in an era where science could solve all our problems. So
Oh, yeah.
the new Flash was very
I mean, the Atomic Age, I think, and the 50s consumerism and lots of things that feed into the birth of the Silver Age. There's so much of it. It's interesting to look at the culture in America and how it affects the comics.
And that's pretty much my absolute favorite thing about comic books.
Yeah.
Is how reflective it is of society
Oh yeah,
in the time. And you can look back at these old comic books and see so much of society in that time
Yeah.
reflected in them.
and my favorite pieces of American history are the 40s, 50s, and 60s. So the golden silver ages of comics are so fascinating and interesting to me from a historical perspective. And Silver Age comics are just the most fun in the world to read. What else you got, Julie? Love it. I like this piece done by Joe Kubert here of Julie and the question.
I'm gonna switch where he wears his ring. It's gonna change everything.
Well, he changed a lot of stuff. I mean, it was the name and powers only was really
Absolutely.
the same. But
Yeah, he talks about how the only thing he keeps is the oath because he just loves the oath.
yeah. Oh man, and I love the Gil Kane art on those early Hal Jordan Lantern stories. Gil Kane was a god. Oh, it's beautiful. I read an article in, I think it was Alter Ego magazine, that kind of talked about the evolution of the oath because that wasn't what it was
What it always
originally.
was.
It changed over time because the Golden Age Lantern did have the same oath, but it developed over time into what we call it now. Oh, I love the Challenges of the Unknown. Jack Kirby created them. Do you know that? Oh, I love this.
I hate the word society. It's so cool.
This is funny. Aquaman had been a character since the 40s, right? And he'd been regularly appearing as a backup character. That issue of The Brave and the Bold, which is the debut of the Justice League, that's his first cover appearance.
Oh.
Even though he'd been around for well over a decade. Oh, Martin Goodman. Oh, man. Yes.
And this is where they talk about the Avengers, right?
The Fantastic Four.
Oh, right. Fantastic Four.
I love this story so much, though.
Golf, bringing people together and dividing the comic book industry.
Yeah. But it's funny, because Marvel, as Timely, had been going, since the Golden Age as well. But, I love this, though. But Timely, they were kind of not a big deal. They had Captain America and Namor and the Torch, and those were kind of minor popular characters. Captain America was a big deal in the Golden Age. But again, the 40s, they were known as Timely. In the 50s, they had just basically done war books and giant monster books, science fiction monster books, under the title Atlas. And in the 60s, they became Marvel. And then we had the birth of the Marvel Age with that first Fantastic Four. Mort Weisinger. No one liked him as a person. And he's awful.
I loved Neil Adams' story about him.
Oh, yeah.
He said, well, look at me. And then, Neil Adams kind of, oh, okay.
Yeah. But Mort Weisinger and writer Otto Binder, who was a science fiction writer, created all of the wonderful things about Superman that I love. The Phantom Zone, Brainiac, Bizarro, the City of Kandor, the Fifth Dimension, Mr. Mxyzptlk, all the imaginary stories, all the weird red kryptonite stories. That's all from Mort Weisinger as an editor and Otto Binder as a writer. And they created, the best Superman stories. I love all that mythology. It's so funny, though, because they would do a lot of those oddball stories with Batman in the 50s and early 60s, and it had the opposite effect. It really sucked. They're really lame. I don't like Silver Age Batman very much. I love him in the Bronze Age and the Golden Age, but
Batman has some of my favorite villains in the DC universe.
Oh, and most people's. But it's funny. I mean, Detective Comics was almost canceled, even though that's the name of the company.
Absolutely.
And it's so funny, the Batman TV show, that issue, I think we saw the cover with the Riddler or whatever. A TV exec saw that and saw, this is perfect, I want to do something like this. The Riddler was a very minor recurring villain, and that TV show made him a major villain. I mean, even after the success of the show, the Riddler probably had a total of 8 stories from 1940-something when he debuted to about 1985 when the Bronze Age ended. Seriously.
And that's one of the best things about the Batman villains is that they can be done really well, super campy.
Yeah.
But they can also be done really well as serious, formidable villains.
Yeah. And also,
just that versatility.
Oddly enough, in the bulk of the 60s, there are almost no Joker stories either. And you think that's the number one Bat villain. You think he'd be all over. Nope. You see him kind of fade out of the picture by the time the 60s roll around, and he's kind of brought back more at the end of the decade when the Bronze Age starts. It's interesting. I love how different DC and Marvel are in the Silver Age, and the competition and being, especially Marvel trying to be different than DC and DC doing their own thing, creates this wonderful it's a wonderful atmosphere of we're both creating lots of great superhero comics that are night and day from each other. And the back and forth that kind of goes between them since has, I think, spurred on or prevented stagnation in the medium, largely. But then we get the Bronze Age, which is also, it's my second favorite period to read in comics. We get Neil Adams.
And there's the pictures of them with the hair. And
man, Denny's a real old man. I mean, I can't believe Neil's in his 70s. He's very youthful. I mean, I've got to meet him twice now, because I met him at Comic-Con again this weekend. And he was the coolest.
Oh, he's just great. And I love, he and Denny O'Neil did some of my favorite stories.
The Green Lantern, Green Arrow stuff. That stuff is amazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Spencer, my friend Spencer, he came with me to con on Sunday, and he went and he talked to Neil. He says, Green Lantern, Green Arrow is the reason I'm a comic book reader. Thank you. He told me this later. I wasn't with him when he said that. But I was like, right on, you know. But oh, by the way, it's totally tangential. But I met George Perez this weekend, and what a nice man. He's great. Hey, there's Julie. I love this archival footage with Julie and Carrie Bates, who is an a-hole. He is totally refuses to talk about his time as a comic book writer. He's Mr. Hollywood Big Shot. He's too cool for that now.
Huh.
But Carrie Bates wrote some cool Legion of Superhero stories in the 70s, too.
And that's the funny thing is, Marv Wolfman was just talking about how the people that were there during that time were the ones that grew up on comic books and wanted to be in comics. To have that guy to
the Bronze Age is a wonderful time because and they say here, it's the first generation of people who grew up reading comics and saying, this is what I want to do. Yeah.
Because it's just such a great way to communicate.
Well, right, and comic book fandom of the 60s and 70s, in the earliest comic fanzines and the writing letters that would appear in the publications, it's an amazing time for fandom. And those early comic conventions, I think the first one is in New York in 1964, it's a magic time. It's a time that I would love to experience. When guys like Roy Thomas and Len Wein and George R.R. Martin are young guys who just love this, and they're like teenagers and they're involved in comic fandom. Exciting. My name's Jeff Johns. He's a pretty good writer.
He's okay.
Well, he's not like awesome all the time.
Right.
He's like Brian Michael Bendis in that aspect. He does many good things, but not everything he does is gold. They're both very prolific. Not everything's going to be spectacular. Not everything Danny O'Neill wrote is the greatest. Yeah, but I loved, and they're talking about the Green Lantern, Green Arrow stories. I love how they get back to being less about fighting supervillainy and fighting like real life injustice. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it brings it back to the golden age where most of the stuff was about the war and the home front.
Well, yeah, things that are very socially relevant. I mean, it makes sense that the 50s and 60s are very science fiction oriented. Although I love stories where superheroes fighting supervillains, this is important stuff, and I'm glad this
historically,
happened.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. I love this. Yeah. Danny O'Neill is also one of my heroes, not just as a comic book writer, but his personal battle with alcoholism and how he won. So Danny O'Neill and Neil Adams, that's a winning combination, and also
just a great team.
Oh yeah, and their Batman stuff they did together was great too. Neil Adams is a lot of people's definitive Batman artist. He's their favorite, and he's up there for me. I love Jim Aparo's Batman a lot though too. All those Brave and the Bold stories. Not all of them are great stories, but I just love his art on Batman. And then he was kind of the Bat artist of the 80s, the big one.
Yeah, I was really happy with the comic that you gave me to get signed by Neil, Batman and Deadman.
Oh, right. That was from an issue of Brave and the Bold. Now, that's Neil Adams on art for that. But, yeah, that's another great thing that Neil did was Deadman. Terrific. I think Bob Haney wrote those, or at least originally. But I can't remember. But, yeah, this... Okay.
Guess who's awake again?
Hey, Archie's awake. Hi, Archie. Shh, bring him here. I'm the baby whisperer. So, this is so great.
He's got
how Green Lantern...
heroin syringe and...
Oh, yeah. Well, and I love this
because
in those stories, Green Arrow is showing Green Lantern what a square he is and, how things aren't always black and white. and really sticking it to the man, and then turns around and his sidekick, his ward, is a junkie because Green Arrow was not paying attention to him. So I like that he was not infallible. That was really cool.
These are all guys who saw that
Yeah.
made by psychedelic guys. It should be a reflection of times.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I mean, that's what we've been talking about. I like what Mark Waid says there. Oh, yes. And I think we're going to get into Swamp Thing right about here. Oh, House of Secrets. Now, you see this image of the gal on the cover. That's Louise Simonson. She was basically the inspiration for that character in that initial Swamp Thing story. But yeah, Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson created the Swamp Thing, and
I love this when Denny O'Neil talks about
how he blew it
with Wonder Woman, and how he's just so forward about it and just so apologetic, and I love to see
takes away her powers and then makes her mentor a man. Oh man. I love the humility, because that just shows even how makes him seem even more great in my eyes. That he can say like this was a mistake. It's an interesting period for her. I think that's art by Don Heck, illustrated that run too. Oh no, it's Mike Sikowski. Excuse me.
Woo!
Blew it. And then Gloria Steinem, of course.
And then he thanks her for not mentioning him in the article.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's wonderful, just that he can admit, I thought I was on the side of feminism. And then, he realizes he wasn't. And he's just like...
well, that this wasn't serving that cause.
Exactly.
Here's that very famous cover of Ms. Magazine.
This is the TV show.
Oh, yeah. And I think originally the show was set in the 40s, and I didn't realize. I'd never really watched the show. And then they changed it to the New Adventures of Wonder Woman, and then moved it to the 70s. I don't know how that really played out. I've been learning more about this show as of late, because I was aware of it, but I didn't see this as a kid. Watched the Batman show a lot when I was a kid, but not this. But Linda Carter, she's still a beautiful lady. Now, the spinning was definitely something invented by the TV show.
Definitely. And she spun so much more than she needed to.
Well, yeah.
After she had transformed.
See, look at this scene. That's definitely set in the 40s.
Throwing over a car.
I
love the cinematography where they splice scenes together. And
oh, yeah.
And paste.
I would definitely like to go back and watch the show. And yeah, Super Friends, it's pretty bad until like the last couple seasons. When they do the Challenge of the Super Friends, where it's them against the Legion of Doom, that's good. And then the very final season, which was the Legendary Superpowers show, and that's where it was like pretty much all the episodes are the Justice League versus Darkseid and his minions, or Lex Luthor or Brainiac, and that's awesome.
And the Super Friends did nothing for Aquaman. They really...
Yeah. Well, and they have all these dumb comic foils. Sorry, Wonder Friends are lame. Or Wonder Twins are lame, and so is Gleek, and so are Wendy and Marvin. They're terrible. But there's almost no super villains in much of the early Super Friends shows, too. It's random aliens or disasters or things, and Superman, like, forgetting he can fly, it seems like. But the 70s animation was a bad time because there was a big backlash from cartoons in the 60s, that were all getting too violent. And so 70s cartoons became, they was just so watered down and lame. And to do an action cartoon in the 70s, you can never see anyone get punched. And, that kind of thing. And that didn't change again until, I think, sometime in the 80s.
Well, the 80s was very hyper-violent.
There was a lot of great action cartoons in the 80s. And that's also when with the regulations for animation were lifted. Yes, you can use this to sell a toy line, and pretty much every action cartoon in the 80s was selling a toy.
And why not? It's a lucrative way to do so.
Well, sure, and you know what? Those cartoons were fun. He-Man especially. I love that show.
Masterpiece.
Yeah. But the 60s action cartoons, I mean, Hanna-Barbera had great original properties like Johnny Quest.
Oh,
but also,
boy.
But also they had the Fantastic Four show, which it pulled the plug after just like 20, 21 episodes. But it's awesome. It's still one of my favorite animated shows ever.
Why did it get pulled?
I think it was because of that. It was around the same time as Johnny Quest, and people complaining about the violence. People complained that Speed Racer was violent. You have to remember that. And it was a Japanese import. Chris Reeve. I mean,
gosh, what a great Superman. I mean,
when I was a kid, I thought Superman was a real person because of these movies. I mean, so believable.
Absolutely. Great job.
And he's so wonderful. I mean,
and just as a person, he's a great actor
and
for the time, but he's also just a great person.
Yeah, and he just yeah.
I mean, I think Henry Cavill does a great.
Yeah, Cavill is a great Superman.
Job as Superman,
and I think the next movie is going to be wonderful.
But I think, other than Henry Cavill, who does a great job, Christopher Reeve is really the only one worth his salt.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen enough of the George Reeves to really make that. I mean,
the TV show, sure, yeah.
But I mean, this is Superman. I'll always love those first two Superman movies. He's just so wonderful. And I think I've said it before. I think that Chris Evans, his Captain America is to Captain America what Chris Reeves is to Superman. I mean, I think it's just too perfect. I'm so excited about the Winter Soldier. April 4th cannot come soon enough. But oh yeah, unfortunately, 3 and 4 are pretty bad movies. Can't believe that
they did the Superman Muhammad Ali.
No, that's cool. And with Neil Adams, I mean, I just can't believe how bad 3 and 4 are of Superman. When the logical choice would have been for number 3 to go with Brainiac. Or something. I mean, just. Oh, Jeanette Kahn, and she's cool. Fresh blood that was, I think, much needed at the time. Because DC really suffered in the 1970s. And in the 80s, they really had a wonderful resurgence, and they really... the 80s was an incredible decade for DC Comics and comics in general. It's very true. Very true. Oh, we got Karen Berger, and she's a wonderful editor. No longer at DC, but that's very recent.
Did she go someplace else?
I think they have things. It's Dan Didio bull crap. Is the short answer. But she basically cultivated and made the Vertigo line what it is.
So important in DC's.
It is. I mean, and it made in the 90s when comic books really there was a lot of quantity and not a lot of quality. The Vertigo line were again this was the oasis of really great intelligent comics. And here's Frank Miller. Yeah. Oh, and he's just crazy. I don't know what it is about comic stars of the 80s, and they just become these lunatic a-holes later. But Frank Miller and John Byrne and Alan Moore were brilliant comic creators, but oh my gosh, they're nuts, all three of them. even George Perez, who is regarded as one of the nice guys of comics, poor guy did I talk about this last episode? Poor guy had a nervous breakdown in the early 90s.
I know you told me about it, but I don't know if it was in a different...
I don't know if we talked about it on the show or not, but yeah. But he got better, and he came back, had a triumphant return to comics, and he's still going strong. And God bless him.
I've always had a love-hate relationship with this comic, with The Dark Knight Returns.
In what way?
I don't really know. I can't quite put my finger on it.
Is it the art? Because I'm not crazy by it myself.
I think that might be what it is. It seems kind of ill-paced and kind of just in your face.
Is that what it is? Okay.
Maybe I'm not...
I'm just, like, I like Frank Miller as a writer generally. He's not one of my favorite artists.
Oh, so he drew it as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think his art is I liked it a little more understated.
The story is just brilliant.
Oh, it's terrific. But I liked his art on Daredevil over at Marvel. But it's a weird period. It's wonderfully written and done, the Daredevil stuff. But I miss Daredevil's Rogues Gallery because it seems like they go away and he's mostly fighting just Kingpin and Bullseye and white collar crime. And that's fine, but superheroes need supervillains to be the predominant adversary. And that's what I think that the Miller run lacks. And it's weird. Some people don't. That's their only Daredevil. And he had a wonderful period in Silver Age and also in the 70s, with a colorful cast of villains. And it's still an incredibly well written book consistently. So yeah, I get on these tangents.
Nothing wrong with tangents.
I love Marvel Comics too. I remember seeing this in the theater when I was a kid. I was in the first grade.
I didn't even like these when I was younger.
Really?
Really. I think the one that I liked was Batman and Robin.
When
I was younger, because Robin was in it, and because of Alicia Silverstone a little bit.
And Tim Burton can go straight to hell. Do you know what I heard him say a thing one time. He's like, I would never read a comic book.
But he made the movie.
But he made 2 Batman movies, and they're not that good.
No.
I mean, the first one is good if it didn't have all that Prince crap that doesn't make any sense. Like, why is that here? Like, oh, ugh. And it's weird because you think Tim Burton is this weird goth guy, and you think, like, God, couldn't you put The Cure or something in? Like, that would have made more sense. Ah, look, Alan Moore.
Here we go.
But yeah, Tim Burton, you make awful movies that look good.
I'm Alan Moore. I write comics.
Yeah, he does. I like the black suit and the white tie. That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. These
Neil
guys.
Gaiman is... Oh, I can't say enough about Neil Gaiman.
Oh, he's great. I mean...
And the fact that he puts up with Alan Moore and all of his shenanigans. And
well, he's one of these guys that he's like... He kind of came in on the crest that Alan Moore rode in, but Alan Moore has never really, that I know of, slagged Gaiman. Gaiman's a cool guy. Alan Moore certainly slags Grant Morrison, who he says is like, look, you're just doing me. And it is. Morrison is very much in the Moore and Gaiman zone.
Oh, this is the Len Wein story.
Oh my gosh.
It's actually Len Wein.
This is a wonderful story.
And it makes Alan Moore seem not so crazy.
Well, here's the thing. I read last year. I read an interview with Len Wein because they were coming. DC was coming out with the Before Watchmen books, the comics, and I thought they were great. And Len Wein was doing some writing for them, and so okay. And he's still kind of a big figure at DC. I mean, at least as historically. And he's talking about, it's like, look, DC writes Alan Moore like a check every year, a check that could choke a horse, and he still complains and like, how dare you, because DC owns the Watchmen characters. Like, he has incensed that they would use it. It's like, it's their property. And honestly, when they did the Before Watchmen stories, they were largely very good, and it took away nothing from the original Watchmen, it added to it, and it was cool. And it was so wonderful to have more stories with those characters, rather than just one 12-issue book.
Which was phenomenal,
oh,
obviously.
Yeah. But
when there's nothing wrong
Why
with
not?
wanting more and having more,
it's like,
especially when it's written well.
Well, it's not like they were wholly Alan Moore's original idea anyway. They were all pastiches of mostly the Charlton action heroes that DC acquired, but also of other Golden Age heroes as well. So, yeah. I mean, the Night Owl, for instance, is kind of an amalgam of the Guardian, who was a Jack Kirby character, and the Charlton character, Blue Beetle. And on with that kind of stuff. Yeah, Watchmen is pretty great. Pretty great.
It's pretty great. You know, it's okay.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And Rorschach is such a Steve Ditko character. He's definitely... It's funny, when Steve Ditko got wind of Rorschach, that's another story that's interesting. Oh, yeah, Paul Pope. Yeah, he's cool.
See, when I see these young guys in the interviews with, Neil Adams and Neil Gaiman, and I just think, well, what have they done?
Well, here's the thing. Paul Pope has been around, and I'm blanking on his stuff, but he's important. And I think it's important. It's like, from a historical perspective, to get people who are not just all these old guys, that this is a multi-generational thing and that's ongoing, like inventiveness and blah, on and on. But Grant Morrison is always interesting.
I love the cat on his shoulder. That's
look when he had
fantastic.
hair. When Grant Morrison had hair.
Same with
look at this, Neil
Daniel
Gaiman and Julie Schwartz. I love that picture. Look, Neil Gaiman and Frank Miller.
Have you ever thought about accounting?
There is a wonderful documentary called In Search of Steve Ditko, and it's the host of that program, I forget his name, and Neil Gaiman. They're like the people in the documentary, and they're talking about Ditko the whole time, and then they actually go and meet him, and he won't be filmed or interviewed, but you will see them, and they talk to him, and they come back, and they're on footage like, we just met Steve Ditko, and it was amazing. It's like Fight Club. You can't,
can't talk about it, but
yeah.
Oh man, was it awesome!
Yeah, I encourage you to watch that documentary. It's really great. It's on YouTube. It's terrific. It's In Search of Steve Ditko. It's pretty wonderful. So yeah.
Oh, Sandman. Another brilliant...
Oh, yeah. I want to talk more about Steve Ditko for a second.
Please.
If you don't know anything about him, he is like a guy, he doesn't want to be photographed, he doesn't do interviews, he's big on the Ayn Rand thing, okay? He's a very odd duck in comics. He's 86 years old, he's still doing stuff, but now it's all his independent, his stuff. So, he basically walked away from mainstream comics. Yeah. Oh, I love this issue of Sandman where they did the fairies and stuff as the audience of Shakespeare putting on Midsummer Night's Dream. If you've never read that, that's a terrific issue. Sandman's good. I still want to read superheroes more, but I think it's great.
See, and I kind of have my fill with superheroes.
And you're branching out into those other things.
I'm trying to look into Vertigo and...
Well, there's great stuff to be read there, let me tell you.
And this is going to make me sound really stupid, but my first introduction to Constantine was the movie.
Well, everyone has an introduction in some form or another, and I'm not going to judge you for that. I've never seen that movie.
I'm not a huge Keanu Reeves fan.
No, he's awful.
But I thought it was a good movie.
Well, okay, and you may really like it. I was introduced to Constantine pretty much, I think, from... Well, he was introduced in Alan Moore's Swamp Thing,
yeah.
And I think apart from I think that's where I read him first.
And that's
I never got into Hellblazer, so yeah, I like him as a supporting character. I don't see him as a lead, so that's the difference with me with Constantine. But
sure.
But he's cool.
That's one of the things about the movie was I saw it and I didn't know that he was British. I didn't know he was from Liverpool and
right
because they don't. There's something
Keanu could never convey that. He wouldn't, even if he tried.
They were saying that he was fashioned from Sting, from the Police, and they were thinking that maybe they could get him to do it.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? That makes perfect sense. Yeah. No, especially reading the Alan Moore Swamp Thing. I'm like, yeah, that is totally like Sting. And also he's in Sandman too.
I love how what was his name?
I forgot. He's the guy who created like Icon and I think Static Shock.
I love how he talks about Will Eisner, about the Spirit, and
Ebony White.
Ebony White just being this character that
doesn't even look human.
Doesn't even look human, but you have to deal with it to get a great story.
Yeah. But the thing is, Eisner did not create Ebony to be like a jab at black people. It's not a horrible, other than his appearance, it's not a horrible racist stereotype. He's always helpful, resourceful, and a well-rounded character, especially throughout the Spirit's adventures.
I see him kind of as the short round of the Spirit comics.
Oh, you mean from the Temple of Doom?
Yeah.
I saw somebody reference that, the name Short Round, because what's the Asian guy from The Walking Dead?
Oh,
originally
Glenn,
Glenn, he kind of looked like Short Round with the hat and stuff in the first season. And I'm like, what the heck is Short Round? Because I've actually, to this day, I've never seen the Temple of Doom from start to finish.
It's really not worth it. It's barring, the fourth Indiana Jones that nobody wants to talk about. Yeah. It's the worst one.
Yeah. So I never really, but here's the thing, was for some reason when I was a kid I would miss the second film and a lot of things. I never saw Empire Strikes Back from start to finish.
That's
No. Now,
Wars.
But I mean for years, my childhood, I never really saw it. I would just see it piecemeal. But we had Star Wars and Return of the Jedi taped off TV, so I had those. I watched those a lot. But yeah, I only saw Empire kind of piecemeal.
For some reason, Empire Strikes Back is just my favorite Star Wars.
Well,
I love the Battle of Hoth. It's just
it's probably my favorite too. Maybe. I like Jedi a lot.
Yeah,
I like Jedi
really
a lot.
likes Jedi. And I do too. I just don't.
I mean, the climactic lightsaber fight in Return of the Jedi it's awesome. Absolutely. That whole everything is so sweet. Oh man, the death of Superman.
Death of Superman.
And I think we'll be talking about that very soon on a future episode of this. We're going to do the Superman Doomsday DVD commentary. But, God, the story isn't bad, but man, Doomsday is such a lame, one-dimensional character. I hate Doomsday. I mean,
I don't know.
I get they didn't want to have one of his classic villains kill him off, and that's why also at in Batman they had Bane created. They didn't want to have one of his classic rogues, be the one that cripples him or takes him out or whatever. Bane is a much better character. I'm into Bane.
Bane is fantastic.
But Doomsday is just like the unstoppable monster that's like totally overpowered, and I usually never harp on being overpowered any character, but that one is just like, man, spoilers. They punch each other to death, and that's stupid.
Yeah.
But I think in the wake of Superman's death, they did some really great stories, and the return and the reign of the Supermen, that's really fun. And then bringing Superman back was cool. Here's Louise just bawling over Superman dying.
Superman. That's great. How you can be so emotionally invested.
Yeah, and I remember I was reading that when it came out, and This is where I started to notice DC because I really was more of a Marvel Comics kid. I had like a handful of DC comics, and then all my other comics were Marvel when I was a kid.
That's kind of the opposite of me.
Yeah. I thought you said most of your stuff was the Archie stuff when you were a kid.
Yeah. Well, when I was a kid, it was all Archies. And then, as I branched out and got older, it was all DC and, some Marvel, but not much.
It's interesting also to talk about this, looking at this period, the speculator market. Oh, everyone's going to buy this Death of Superman because they think it's going to be worth some money because Action Comics is $1 million book now. Well, Action Comics is incredibly scarce, and that's why it's worth $1 million. Yeah, maybe a couple dozen known copies. But this went into, they printed millions of copies of this. It's worth nothing.
And everybody's speculating on it, so everybody's hanging on to it.
This is what was happening in the early 90s, the speculator boom, and all the chromium covers and lots of number ones and gimmicky stuff and lousy comics on the inside. Lots of people buying comics, and if they opened them up, wow, this is junk. And it hurt the medium so much because once the speculator boom the bottom fell out of it, people realized, wait, these aren't going to increase in value.
And that was the problem that I came up against when I first started really getting into comics.
Yeah.
Is that I was looking for ones that might be valuable someday, and like not reading them just because I thought they might be good, but because I thought they might be valuable.
Right.
And then it took me, a month or two and a couple really bad comics.
Yeah.
To realize if I'm going to be spending money on this, I should just get what I love and don't really care about.
Exactly. I mean, storytelling is the most important aspect of comic books. It's of any form of literature, and the speculator period in the 90s, I mean, it practically killed comics because when the bottom fell out of it, once people realized they weren't building stock portfolios with comics, that wasn't going to work.
And that's where Mark Waid comes in and does Kingdom Come.
Oh, it's my Desert Island book. I love it so much. Did I lend that to you?
I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet.
Okay. It's wonderful. It's a giant middle finger to 90s comics. I said on a other podcast I was on the other day, I said this book is a middle finger to Rob Liefeld.
Yeah.
Which is great. And jerks like Todd McFarlane, who are just terrible artists and lousy storytellers. But
I don't know who they are, but that's okay.
McFarlane, really?
Spawn? I've heard of Todd McFarlane.
Well, McFarlane created Spawn, and he had a very much lauded, and I don't know why, run on Spider-Man because it's awful and it's ugly. And Liefeld was known for creating Deadpool and X-Force and crap at Marvel, and also
much everything that I can't stand about Marvel Comics.
Yeah. And even worse things at Image once those guys left Marvel and created their own company. They're making all this flashy art with no story, and it's just garbage. And they sold a lot of comics initially, but it harmed the industry and how people perceive comics immeasurably. Because again, people are buying a lot of comics, but once they crack them open, it was like, oh, this is junk. So a lot of people weren't reading comics, and even people who were reading them enthusiastically. There's a lot of I know guys who are like, "Man, Spawn was my favorite comic book," and I'm like, "It's awful.
Yeah.
This is not."
How many comic books have you read? Really,
Yeah.
Spawn is your favorite.
Yeah. Excuse me. So, just an awful time. Once the late '90s came around and comics started to bounce back, it's like, with good storytelling and good art again. Yay! I love this big Alex Ross picture of the Legion of Superheroes. That's really terrific. In case you didn't know, I love the Legion.
Oh, I've known.
Yeah, I can't seem to shut up about them these days.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and this bit of the Comic-Con scene is really cool. I hate the two geeks that they talk to for interview footage. This homosexual in the Superman costume, corny. He's actually been in some Superman fan films.
Oh, has he?
Yeah, I've seen some footage of that.
Is he actually gay?
I'm sure of it. Absolutely certain. And then they talk to some other geek who talks about, the Batman family. I'm like, oh, go away. But other than that, this is a great documentary. I think we're near the end of it. But
let's just say right now that Comic Reflections has no problem with people of homosexual orientations.
No, not at all. I'm just saying, like, oh, that guy's gay. It's like, even if some guys, like, even if they're trying really hard not to flame, you can kind of tell. But I don't know where I'm even going with that.
That's okay. For the majority of cosplaying, I'm not a huge fan.
Yeah.
But some people do it really, really well.
Like me.
Exactly. Oh,
my Captain Marvel costume that my mom made is really terrific.
it is.
I never watched Smallville. I think I saw like the pilot.
I never did either.
But I guess, but in the last couple seasons, they got like the Justice Society and the Legion and stuff. I'm like, okay, now I might want to have to go back and watch this.
Oh man, the Christopher Nolan
Those
Batman trilogy
are so wonderful. I know, but this is unpopular, but I think Ben Affleck is going to do great. He's going to surprise people. as Batman.
Oh, I think he could do a great job. I really don't think he did that bad in Daredevil. I think the problem with Daredevil was the writing of the movie.
Well, everything but Affleck. I mean, he's not the greatest, but here's the thing. Matt Murdock is a much more complex and difficult character to play, I think, than Batman. There have been bad Batman movies, but no bad Batmen.
Yeah. I did not know The History of Violence was a comic.
Yeah. I haven't read the comic, but I sure liked the movie. That was good. Road to Perdition was another one. That was a great movie. I'd actually like to get down and read the comic one of these days. Watchmen. That was one of the. It's probably the best possible adaptation we could have. For Zack Snyder, he's the guy. He's it for making comic book movies.
Well, I really liked V for Vendetta. I liked how that was done.
Was that? That's not Snyder though. But
no,
V for Vendetta is an excellent movie.
Yeah, it was James McTeague that did V for Vendetta, and it was just great. Did not like Superman Returns.
Nobody does. It's terrible.
Didn't like it at all.
And I'm
surprised they even included it in here. Really.
Well, it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, everything about that movie is just kind of wrong. It's like, hey, let's make a Superman movie. Hey, you go write a script. Instead of somebody comes with a great Superman story and let's make it. This guy, I wish he wasn't in this documentary. Shut up. But Superman Returns, I have commented, I really like his costume in it because it looks all cool and leathery. But then going back, I'm like, except that the S shield is so small. The guy is just wrong. Brandon Routh just doesn't look like Superman.
No, I like him as an actor and some of the things that he does.
I haven't seen him in anything else.
Not for Superman.
But yeah.
I like the Killing Joke.
Ah, yes. Oh man, I love this. This is a great montage. I almost wondered if in Man of Steel that he used the Superman Returns costume but make the S shield the size that it should be. How awesome that would have looked. When I first saw photos from the Man of Steel, I was like, I hate this costume. Until you see him in it and moving in the movie, then it looks rad. And I like its kind of chainmail-y look. I mean, I can't believe I do like that. But that's how I want Captain America's costume to look, because that's how it is in the comics, you know?
Right.
I don't know. I think of Captain America as just like Superman, only without the powers. And, I like on the moral aspect and embodying the American myth and everything. To me, they're both such compelling characters. So, I don't know. Randomness. God bless him, yeah.
Even
was that Jack Kirby over there on the right that we just kind of panned in? Really? See that real quick?
I didn't see it. Missed it.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have to pick up Swamp Thing too.
Yeah, I have the trade of the Len Wein, Bernie Wrights and stuff. I've read the Alan Moore Swamp Thing. I don't own it, but it's good reading. Super good. Super good. Yeah. Very true. And that's a wrap.
That concludes it.
Yeah, so what do we, any final thoughts as the credits go on this?
I just love DC as a company. They are probably my favorite comic book company. Image is really close, and I like some of the stuff that Marvel's doing, but just as a whole.
Yeah.
And maybe I need to go watch a Marvel documentary just so I can get
I don't think there is one, unfortunately, but I think there's one about Stan Lee, which I need to see. But the thing is, I love DC comics. Like I said, I was a Marvel kid, and as an older, I've been more of a DC guy. I think the current state of DC Comics, DC is kind of taking a crap, right, personally, and Marvel is doing much more interesting books. But that being said, as far as I read tons and tons of old comics in my spare time, and they're predominantly DC. So. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, the direction that they're taking with the New 52, I'm not the biggest fan of. Flashpoint, I feel...
That was a great story.
It was a great story, but I don't think it was worthy of ushering in a new era in DC.
Well, and DC didn't need a reboot. And Dan Didio has this idea that what largely as DC's greatest strength is all of this history, he is looking at it as its weakness. And so the Legion, even though they did start the New 52 with the Legion, they had two books and a limited series, they didn't give them much of a chance and canceled them. The Justice Society, they're not existing as a pre-Justice League team. They're just on Earth 2 and in a revamped role in the Earth 2 book, which is a good book.
Yeah, I read that it's one of the favorites.
It's one of the gems of the New 52, and it's interesting to see that new take in that. But we're not. I think in a few years maybe the New 52 will get good, but I feel like it's like DC was post Crisis on Infinite Earths. Those first few years, I'm like, this is actually a lot of. There's some okay stuff, but a lot of this isn't too happening. And DC had a wonderful time from the late 90s until through the early, up through the reboot, the New 52, happening. That's a terrific creative period. And then I love DC in the Bronze Age, and of course the Silver Age and Golden. But there's a time where DC was pretty not too just happening.
Okay. I love what they did in the
and I feel they're not too happening now.
Yeah, I love what they did historically.
Yeah,
I love their origins. It's a fascinating tale.
Yeah,
and I really love what they're doing with the new. I love what they're doing with the New 52 with Aquaman.
It's a great book.
He is my favorite, probably DC character. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But I really like what they're doing.
Well, you like what you like.
Yeah, with his
and
book.
I think the strong books in the New 52, and this movie's over, and so whatever, we can continue talking for just a spell. The strong books in the New 52 are the ones that are solo books, generally speaking. And the bad books are very good, too. All of the Superman titles have been bad. I haven't read Superman and Wonder Woman. I heard that one's okay. But the other ones they're just bad.
Wonder Woman's new single, book.
Solo book. That's good.
Is great.
Yeah, no.
And Aquaman is great, and I really like Forever Evil. I think.
No, I'm liking that event too.
But that's like 5 of all of the books that they're putting out.
Yeah, I mean, at any given... the New 52, they've tried to have it as 50... Generally, at any time, they've got 52 titles, roughly. And yeah, not all... Many of them are just not good books. So, but that's a conversation for another day. I think it's time to wrap it up.
Alrighty.
So we'll call it good. Goodbye.